There is a version of you that never disappeared. It is still inside you. Right now, even as you sit here listening, a younger version of you is still alive in your nervous system. Not physically, but emotionally. That version still feels what you once felt, still reacts the way you once reacted, still carries the pain you thought you outgrew. And here is the most important truth. You are not only living your adult life, you are also unconsciously living your childhood emotions. Most people don't realize this. They think they are reacting to today. But in reality, they are reliving yesterday, a moment from years ago, a feeling from childhood, a memory that was never fully processed. It all gets replayed in adult situations, and you don't even notice it because it feels normal. But normal does not mean healed. Have you ever noticed? Someone says something small, but your reaction is extremely strong. Or a situation happens, and your emotional response feels too much for the moment. That is not random. That is your inner child reacting. Psychologists like Carl Rogers and later schema therapy researchers discovered something important. Human emotional patterns are deeply formed in early childhood experiences, especially between ages 0 to 12. During this time, your brain is not just learning language or behavior. It is learning emotional survival. It is building beliefs like, am I safe? Am I loved? Am I enough? Do I matter? And every experience you had as a child started forming emotional schemas. Schemas are mental templates. They decide how you interpret life. And once formed, they quietly run in the background of your adult personality. So when something happens today, you are not reacting to the present moment only. You are reacting through the lens of your past. Imagine a child, small, quiet, sensitive. That child once needed comfort, but didn't receive it, or needed attention, but was ignored, or needed safety, but felt fear. Now imagine that child never left. They simply grew older with you, but emotionally, they stayed frozen in time. So now, when you face rejection, that child feels it first. When someone ignores you, that child feels abandoned again. When someone criticizes you, that child feels not good enough again. And the adult you just reacts to what the child inside is feeling. This is why emotional reactions often feel uncontrollable, because they are not adult reactions. They are childhood echoes. Inner child work is based on a core idea in psychology. Your personality is not one single identity. It is a collection of emotional states formed over time. Some of these states are mature, some are protective, and some are deeply childlike. This concept is widely used in schema therapy, developed by psychologist Jeffrey Young. Schema therapy explains that early emotional experiences create life traps in the mind. These traps influence relationships, self-worth, emotional regulation, fear responses, attachment styles, and most importantly, they operate unconsciously. That means you don't choose them. They choose for you. Here is something most people never understand. Your body grows older, but your emotional memory does not automatically update. If a child experienced rejection repeatedly, that emotional imprint remains active. If a child felt ignored, that emotional imprint stays stored. If a child felt unsafe expressing emotions, that pattern becomes internalized silence. So even at age 25, 30, or 40, a part of your nervous system still behaves like it is trying to survive childhood conditions. This is why you overthink relationships, you fear abandonment, you struggle with self-worth, you become overly sensitive to criticism, you seek validation without realizing it. These are not personality traits. These are emotional survival patterns. Now you are beginning to see something deeper. Your emotional reactions are not random. They are not weakness. They are not overthinking. They are old emotional memories trying to protect you in the present. And until you meet that inner child, you cannot fully understand yourself. One of the most important ideas in modern psychology is this: you are not always reacting to the present moment. Sometimes, you are reacting to an old emotional memory that got reactivated. This is not just theory. This is supported by decades of psychological research on emotional memory, attachment, and early conditioning. One of the most influential psychologists in this area was John Bowlby. He discovered something powerful. A child's early emotional bond with caregivers shapes how that person will love, trust, and connect for the rest of their life. This is called attachment theory, and it explains why adult relationships often feel too intense emotionally, because the emotional blueprint was created in childhood. Let's make this real. A child who experiences inconsistent love, emotional neglect, or unpredictable attention does not simply forget it when they grow up. Instead, the brain adapts. It creates survival strategies like becoming overly attached, fearing abandonment, overthinking relationships, or avoiding emotional closeness altogether. These are not personality traits. They are emotional defense systems, and they continue operating in adulthood automatically, even when the original danger is gone. Your brain has a structure called the amygdala. It is responsible for detecting emotional threats. When something feels familiar to past emotional pain, the amygdala reacts instantly, before logic, before reasoning, before awareness. This is why sometimes you overreact emotionally, because your brain is not responding to what is happening now. It is responding to what it remembers from the past. Imagine a grown adult in a simple situation. Someone doesn't reply to a message. Logically, nothing is wrong, but internally, a storm begins. Thoughts like, did I do something wrong? Are they ignoring me? What if they leave? Now pause. Why does a small silence feel like emotional danger? Because somewhere inside, a younger emotional memory is being activated. A memory where silence once meant rejection. This is what psychologists call emotional schema activation. Your present moment becomes a trigger for an old emotional wound. Psychologist Carl Rogers explained something very important. People do not suffer because of reality. They suffer because of how they interpret reality based on past experiences. In other words, two people can experience the same situation, but react completely differently because their internal emotional history is different. This means your pain today is not just about today. It is about how your mind learned to interpret life early on. Inner child therapy is not a spiritual idea. It is a psychological approach used in modern therapy systems like schema therapy. Developed further by psychologist Jeffrey Young, it focuses on identifying unmet childhood emotional needs, repeated emotional patterns, and internal belief systems formed early in life. The goal is simple: to help the adult mind recognize and reprocess childhood emotional responses. Because healing does not come from ignoring the past. It comes from understanding it. At this stage, you must understand something deeply. Your emotional reactions are not wrong. They are learned survival responses. But what protected you in childhood can limit you in adulthood. And until you recognize that separation, you will keep reacting as if every emotional trigger is a threat to your survival, even when it is not. Now the picture is becoming clearer. Your emotions are shaped by early attachment. Your reactions are influenced by unconscious memory. Your brain uses past experiences to interpret present life. And most importantly, much of what you feel is not happening in the present moment. It is happening in your emotional history. There is something strange about human emotions. Sometimes the smallest things create the biggest reactions. A tone of voice, a short reply, a delayed message, a facial expression. Logically, these things are nothing, but emotionally, they feel heavy, personal, even painful. And here is the psychological truth. You are not reacting to the situation. You are reacting to what the situation reminds you of. This is what psychologists call emotional triggering, and it is deeply connected to unconscious memory systems in the brain. A trigger is not the event. A trigger is the activation of stored emotional memory. When something in the present resembles an old emotional experience, your brain does not analyze it logically. It reacts automatically, because the emotional system in your brain is faster than your thinking system. This is why reactions often feel instant. There is no gap between event and emotion. It feels like one single moment. But inside the brain, a full memory scan has already happened. Your brain has two main pathways for processing information. The fast emotional system, amygdala-driven, the slower rational system, prefrontal cortex. The fast system reacts in milliseconds. The slow system takes time. So when something feels emotionally intense, your brain is not waiting for logic. It is prioritizing survival. This is why emotional reactions often feel uncontrollable, because they are not designed to be controlled in the moment. They are designed to protect you first and explain later. Now here is where inner child psychology becomes extremely important. When a trigger happens, it is often not your adult self reacting. It is your younger emotional self responding first. That younger part of you still carries unresolved emotional experiences like feeling ignored, feeling rejected, feeling not enough, feeling unsafe, expressing emotions. So when something similar happens today, that emotional memory wakes up, and suddenly, the present moment is no longer just present. It becomes layered with the past. Psychologist John Bowlby explained that early emotional bonds create internal working models of relationships. These models answer unconscious questions like, do people stay or leave? Am I safe in relationships? Do I need to earn love? Once these models are formed, they silently guide adult behavior. So when a trigger happens, it is not just emotional. It is relational memory being activated. Imagine this. You send a message, no reply comes back. Minutes pass, then hours. Logically, nothing is confirmed. But emotionally, something starts to rise inside. Thoughts appear. Did I do something wrong? Are they upset? Am I being ignored? Now pause. Why does silence feel like rejection? Because somewhere in the past, silence once meant emotional pain. So your brain connects the present silence to past emotional experience, not consciously, but automatically. One of the most damaging effects of childhood emotional conditioning is the development of what psychology calls the inner critic. This is the voice inside that says, "You are not good enough. You always mess things up. People will leave you." But here is the truth. This voice is not original. It is learned. Psychologist Carl Rogers explained that the self-concept is built through repeated external feedback, meaning what you heard repeatedly in early life can become your inner dialogue later. So if a child grows up with criticism, that criticism becomes internalized, and later it feels like self-talk, but it is actually stored memory repeating itself. This is where things become even deeper. You might notice you attract similar relationship dynamics. You react the same way in arguments. You feel the same emotional pain in different situations. This is not coincidence. This is emotional pattern repetition. Your subconscious mind is not trying to hurt you. It is trying to maintain familiarity, because familiarity feels safe, even when it is painful. So the mind repeats what it knows, not what is best. At this stage, one truth becomes clear. Most emotional suffering is not created by the present moment. It is created when the present moment activates an old emotional wound. And until that wound is recognized, the reaction will feel automatic, even when you don't want it. You are not just reacting to life in real time. You are reacting through a system of emotional patterns that were built long before you had awareness of them. In psychology, these deep emotional patterns are called schemas. A schema is a mental and emotional blueprint. It is the way your brain organizes experiences, meanings, and expectations about life. And once a schema is formed, it quietly influences how you see yourself, others, and the world. One of the leading psychologists in this field is Jeffrey Young, the founder of schema therapy. He discovered that many emotional struggles in adulthood are not random problems. They are repeated life patterns rooted in childhood experiences. He called these patterns early maladaptive schemas. In simple language, these are emotional life traps. A life trap is something your mind keeps falling into again and again, even when you logically know it is harmful. For example, someone might repeatedly feel abandoned in relationships, even when there is no real abandonment happening. Or someone might constantly feel not good enough, even when they are achieving success. Or someone might expect rejection before it even happens. These are not conscious choices. They are emotional templates running in the background. Your brain is not trying to sabotage you. It is trying to protect you based on what it learned early in life. If a child grew up in an environment where love felt inconsistent, the mind may develop a schema that says love must be earned or it will disappear. If a child experienced emotional neglect, the mind may develop a schema that says people will not be there when needed. And if a child was frequently criticized, the mind may develop a schema that says, "I am not enough." These beliefs are not logical thoughts. They are emotional truths stored in the nervous system. So when you grow up, you do not question them. You feel them as reality. This is why schema therapy is so powerful, because it does not just challenge thoughts. It works with emotional memory itself. Your adult mind might know something is safe, but your emotional system might still feel danger. And in that conflict, emotion usually wins, because emotion is faster than logic. This is why you can understand something logically and still not feel free from it emotionally. For example, you might know that a relationship is healthy, but still feel anxiety when the other person becomes distant. Or you might know that you are capable, but still feel like you are not enough inside. This is a schema reacting, not your present self, but your emotional history speaking through your current experience. And until you recognize these patterns, you will keep experiencing the same emotional cycles in different situations, not because life is repeating itself, but because your mind is repeating its interpretation of life. There is something very uncomfortable about human behavior that most people never understand. You do not always choose what is good for you. You often choose what is familiar, even when it hurts you, even when it drains you, even when you logically know you should move on. Your subconscious mind is not designed to choose happiness. It is designed to choose familiarity, because familiarity feels safe to the brain, even if it is painful. This is one of the most important principles in psychology. What is known feels predictable, and what is predictable feels controllable, even if the experience itself is not healthy. This is why people stay stuck in emotional patterns for years, not because they enjoy suffering, but because their nervous system recognizes it. And what the nervous system recognizes, it trusts. This is deeply connected to what schema therapy describes as life traps. One of the strongest life traps is the abandonment schema. This is the internal emotional belief that people will leave, disappear, or not stay emotionally available. When this schema is active in the mind, a person may unconsciously expect rejection, even in safe relationships. They may interpret neutral behavior as emotional distance. They may overthink silence. They may feel anxiety when things are going well, because their system is not familiar with stability. Stability feels suspicious to a mind that was shaped in emotional uncertainty. This is why some people feel uncomfortable when life is calm. Their nervous system has learned that calm is temporary, so it prepares for loss even when nothing is happening. This is not imagination, it is conditioning. Your brain builds emotional predictions based on your past, and then it tries to protect you by preparing for what it expects to happen. So if your past taught you that people leave, your mind will silently prepare for leaving, even when there is no evidence, even when the present moment is different. This is why relationships often become emotional battlegrounds inside the mind. Not because of reality, understanding something is not the same as healing it. You can know exactly why you feel the way you feel. You can analyze your past. You can recognize your patterns. You can even explain your emotional reactions in detail. But still, nothing inside you changes. And that creates frustration, because the logical mind assumes that awareness should equal transformation. But emotional psychology works differently. Your pain did not begin in logic, so it cannot end in logic. Most emotional wounds are formed in moments of experience, not understanding. They are created when something was felt deeply, especially in early life, without the emotional capacity to process it. This means the memory is not stored as a story. It is stored as a feeling, and feelings are not controlled by reasoning. This is why even intelligent, self-aware people still struggle with emotional patterns. They can explain their trauma perfectly, but still react the same way emotionally when triggered. This is because trauma is not stored in the thinking brain. It is stored in emotional memory systems in the brain and body. When something reminds the nervous system of an old emotional experience, the body reacts first, before thought, before interpretation, before awareness. This is why emotional responses feel automatic, because they are. Psychologically, this is linked to how the brain encodes emotional memory through the limbic system, especially the amygdala. which stores emotional significance. When a present situation resembles a past emotional experience, even slightly, the brain activates the old emotional response, not because it is accurate, but because it is familiar. This is why logic often fails in emotional healing, because logic speaks to the thinking mind, but emotional wounds live in the feeling system, and the feeling system does not respond to arguments. It responds to experience. This is also why talking about trauma alone does not always create deep healing. It can create awareness, but not always transformation, because awareness is only the first layer. The deeper layer is emotional reprocessing. This is where inner child work becomes important, because instead of only analyzing the past, it helps you reconnect with the emotional state that was never fully processed. The idea is not to relive pain. The idea is to reapproach it with awareness, safety, and understanding that was missing originally. When the nervous system experiences a safe version of an old emotional memory, something begins to shift. The emotional charge slowly reduces, not instantly, but gradually, because the brain is updating its internal map of emotional meaning. It is learning, this is not dangerous anymore. This feeling does not need to control me. This memory can exist without pain. And this is where real change begins. Not in explanation, but in emotional reconditioning. Because healing is not about erasing the past. It is about changing your relationship with it. Now we move into something very important. Understanding your emotional patterns is not enough anymore. Now the real question is, how do you actually heal them? How do you reconnect with the part of you that still carries those old emotions? Psychology suggests that healing begins with awareness combined with emotional presence. Not judgment, not analysis, presence. One of the most important ideas in inner child work is emotional reparenting. This means you begin to respond to your internal emotional experiences in the way a healthy, safe, and understanding caregiver would respond. Not by ignoring your emotions, not by suppressing them, but by acknowledging them with compassion. When an emotional trigger happens, instead of reacting automatically, you pause, you observe, and you recognize something very important. This feeling is not from now. This is an old emotional response. That simple awareness creates space between you and the reaction. And in that space, change becomes possible. Because for the first time, you are not inside the emotion. You are observing it. Another powerful technique used in therapy is visualization. You mentally reconnect with your younger self. Not as imagination only, but as emotional recognition. You picture yourself at the age when you first felt that emotional pain. And instead of judgment, you bring understanding. You imagine saying, "I see you, I understand you, you are safe now." This is not about pretending, it is about rewiring emotional memory through safe association. Because the nervous system does not only learn from reality, it learns from emotional experience. When repeated over time, this process slowly reduces the emotional charge of old memories. The past does not disappear, but its control over your present begins to weaken. This is the foundation of emotional healing. Not forgetting, but reprocessing. True healing does not mean becoming a different person. It means becoming a whole person. It means the adult self and the inner child stop being separate systems in conflict and start becoming integrated. Your adult self brings awareness, logic, and stability. Your inner child brings emotion, Vulnerability and authenticity, both are necessary. But when the inner child is unhealed, it starts controlling emotional reactions. And when the adult self is disconnected, life becomes purely mechanical. Healing is the process of balance. It is when emotional responses no longer hijack your behavior, but instead become information, signals, not commands. At this stage, something very important changes inside a person. They no longer fear their emotions. They begin to understand them. They no longer suppress their inner world. They listen to it. Because every emotional reaction becomes a message, not a problem. You start realizing that anxiety is not random. It is a signal. That fear is not weakness. It is protection. That sadness is not failure. It is release. And slowly, the relationship with yourself changes. This is the deepest level of psychological healing. Not fixing yourself, but understanding yourself. Because what you understand, you stop fighting. And what you stop fighting begins to transform naturally. So if you take only one truth from everything in this video, let it be this: you are not broken. You are conditioned. And anything that was conditioned can be reconditioned. Your emotional reactions are not your identity. They are learned responses from a younger version of you who was trying to survive. And now, as an adult, you have something that version never had: awareness, choice, and understanding. Healing is not a single moment. It is a process of returning to yourself again and again with more awareness than before. And every time you do that, you rewrite a part of your emotional system, not through force, but through understanding. So the next time you feel overwhelmed by your emotions, pause for a moment and ask yourself gently, is this my present self reacting or my past self remembering? Because in that question, you create space, and in that space, healing begins.